at this time is that usually on the registration page, there's an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter, but I forgot to include that on the registration. So if you would like to receive our newsletter, which has about 5 emails per cycling season, feel free to put your name first and last in the chat, and I'll find you in the registration list and add your email to the newsletter. And then to jump right in, you guys have obviously signed up for this workshop for a reason. So I just want to give folks an opportunity to type in the chat what they're hoping to get out of today's workshop. You can keep your question or your comment general about what you're hoping to get out of today's workshop, or you can be specific. If there's an intersection that you're really curious about, or a traffic situation you're really curious about that's specific, feel free to type it in the chat. And when that comes up, or when that situation comes up later on in the workshop, we'll try to point that out to you. So I'll give folks a moment here.
And we are recording, right?
We are recording. Perfect. So we're hoping to hear what folks would like to get out of today's workshop. And if you can just type it in the chat, that would be fantastic.
Shall we continue on with introductions while people are thinking that through?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I'll pass the video over to Leanne, and then we'll return to that at the end. So we'll pass it back to me at the end of that. So
all right.
Leanne, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Leanne Coward, and I've been a safe cycling instructor. This will be my 3rd season now. My favorite kind of cycling is fair weather cycling. So when there isn't a stitch of snow on the ground, I do a lot of cycling with my family who are school-age children, and I do a lot of multi-use trails, some road riding when I need to get myself to work to commute, but most of the time I'm with the kids on the multi-use trails. So that's kind of my jam. And I'm going to hand it over to Ken Shields.
Hi, I'm Ken Shields, and I've been a cycling instructor. This would be my 5th year if we were actually instructing on the road. And I'm a cycling advocate as well for I don't know how many years. And I'm coming to you from the shores of Pelican Lake in Sulikout, in case you're wondering about my weird set that I'm in.
All right,
Hi.
Janet, you're up.
Hi, I'm Janet Olson. I've been a safe cycling instructor for, I guess this will be a year now. I like to do road riding, and I like to do my road riding out rural areas. I do use the multi-use trails in town as well, but I like to be out in the country. And I've been cycling since I was quite young. I've done mountain biking. I've come from Southern Ontario, so we do a lot of the rail trail riding out there. So. But now, yeah, road riding. That's what I like.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I'll just go over some of the questions that have come in the chat. So John is just generally hoping to learn the skills that we'll cover today. Spenna, sorry if I mispronounced your name, is interested in learning more about urban cycling corridors and also a bit about rec trails and on-road. Cass has a question about wrong way cyclists. So maybe we can bring that up with predictability. That'll be in Janet's slide when you talk about where to ride. And that's what we've had come in. So let's just dive right in. And Janet has the first part of the presentation. So I will screen share and hopefully get Janet on the video on the side, and we'll can you guys all see the sorry, 1 second. Can you all see the presentation?
Yeah, but is that where we're starting from? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Hi, everybody. So welcome to Safe Cycling Thunder Bay Urban Riding Fundamentals. Today, just a brief outline, we're going to talk about safety basics, bike lanes, shared lanes, multi-use trails, protected bike lanes, riding on the road. Something to consider, one of the most courteous actions cyclists can take is to assume responsibilities for their own safety. Define the space you need for your safety and communicate your decision to the road users around you. Then motorists can act accordingly. Do not ask another road user to guess your safety needs. Safety basics, save your brain. We're going to talk about proper helmet fit. You can always replace a bike, but you can't replace your brain. Your vehicle signal, we're going to talk about hand signals. Ride where you belong, we're going to talk about different places you can ride, like multi-use trails. Be safe, be seen. We'll be talking about what MVPC means. Okay, so helmet fit. All cyclists under the age of 18 years are required to wear a helmet. We call the 2-4-1 salute. So 2 fingers above your eyebrow to the bottom of your helmet. This protects your forehead and also the sides of your head. Okay, so next, you're going to do 4 fingers in a V shape around the bottom of your ears. Keep your straps should be straight and tight or taut. This helps your helmet to remain in a fixed position. And then next, you're going to put 1 finger under your chin strap. The strap should be kept tight to help prevent your helmet from sliding forwards or backwards. Finally, what you're going to do is bend your head, give your head a shake. You want to make sure that your helmet doesn't move or fall off. You should also, when you're buying a helmet, make sure that you try on the helmet to make sure that it's going to fit properly. When you're buying a helmet, it should be approved by one of the following. So it should have a sticker inside. It could either be approved by the Canadian Standards Association, which is CAS, Snell Memorial Foundation, or American National Standards Institute, which is ANSI. Your helmet should also be replaced every 5 years, or if you've been in an accident or crash. There's also a sticker inside the helmet that says when the helmet was manufactured. So that's another thing to look for. Also, never buy a used helmet. You don't know where it's been, or you don't know whether it's been in a crash. Okay, so other safety equipment. Always wear closed-toed shoes when cycling. You don't want to have skin toes. You should have a bell or horn so you can, if you're on a trail or whatever, you can signal that you're coming. Reflective clothing. So an example of reflective clothing is either you can buy like the reflective vests, or you can wear bright colored clothing, a bright colored helmet, because you want to be seen while you're cycling. Some other things are pannier or backpacks. Never carry bags on your handlebars. You don't want to get them caught in the spokes and flip over your handlebars or crash your bike. Some of the other things that I carry are sunscreen. I usually check the weather before I ride, just in case I might want to bring a jacket. What are some of the other things? Oh, also snack and a bottle of water. I also carry a spare tire tube, a pump, tire levers, and also a small toolkit, because I never know if I'm going to get a flat tire out while I'm riding, or a mechanical issue. The other thing I usually carry is some kind of ID. So I usually carry my health card. I either have money or a bank card, just in case I need to stop for ice cream or another water or a drink. Lock your bike, especially right now. Bike theft is high. So some of the locks that you can have are U-lock, chain lock, folding lock, cable lock. The cable lock, some of the locks are easier to cut, so I would invest my money in a good lock. You don't want your prize and possessions stolen.
All right, next we're going to talk about hand signals. So one of the reasons that we signal is to communicate to others our intention to change lanes, to go around parked cars or construction. It is very highly recommended that you have open hands to increase your visibility when you're signaling. So I like to call them jazz hands, a little less shaky, but a little bit more wide, okay? This picture is of somebody doing a left-hand signal. They could have their jazz hands out to make it more visible. And prior to doing a signal, you're going to shoulder check. You're going to make sure that it is safe to stick your arm out from your bike. So if it's not safe to do so because the weather's bad or because there's a bus right beside you, then you wouldn't signal. If it is safe to signal, you do your signal, and then you would shoulder check. You would put your hand back on your bars, shoulder check, and then do the maneuver with both hands on your bar. So you should not be turning while signaling. Can we have the next slide, please? This is the right hand signal, and there's two ways to do this. One is with your left hand arm out at a 90-degree angle with, again, guy should have jazz hands, or you can stick your right hand out straight and point to the direction that you'd like to go. Pointing out with your right arm to the right, it can be helpful if you have shoulder mobility issues. However, it is easier for motorists to see you, and the police in Thunder Bay particularly like when you use the one with your left hand at a 90-degree angle out from your body. And our last hand signal is stop, and this is the opposite of the right hand. It's just down and below. And again, you should have your fingers out. And this is something that you might want to practice while looking in a mirror, because often people do it and their arms are all askew. It's really kind of an awkward type motion to do it properly, but you want to make sure that your arm is as out and as a 90 degrees angle as possible so that you're visible to vehicles behind you. All right, here's all the parts of your bike. There's not going to be an exam at the end to name all the parts, but it's important to know the different parts, especially when we move into the ABC Quick Check, because we will be talking about the parts of the bike. So this section has been gone into in more depth. If you take a look in the chat function, that was last week's webinar, was ABC Quick Check. So we're going to breeze right through this. A is for air. Make sure your tires are pumped up. B is for bars, bells, and brakes. You want to make sure that all of those things are working properly before you get on your bike and go for a little ride. C is for chain and crank. Chain is that you want to make sure that your chain is running smoothly, and crank is to ensure that your pedals are going backwards and forwards and not side to side laterally on the bike. That would be very bad. And quick is for these lovely little parts on some bikes, not all bikes have them, called quick release. You might have them on your seat or your front and your back tire. Those are supposed to be in line with the frame. And the check is one of the parts that children like the best. It's where you pick up your bike a few inches and you drop it and you listen for jingle jangles. And if you hear jingle jangles, it might be an indication to you that you need to tighten something up before you go on a lovely ride.
Hi, I've got to talk about some mapping and whatnot. It's you'll see in the chat up top, I put the link to this actual information, the Active Transportation Network in Thunder Bay. There's currently many ways to get around town. Note that the trails end at the intercity area. The city is working to rectify that and actually putting in some protected bike lanes in the future through Memorial, Carrick Street, that sort of area. So stay tuned to that. There's a newly passed transportation master plan and active transportation master plan, and that is on there. So then we've got multi-use trails. So wonderful, because no vehicles to worry about. The longest examples of our multi-use trails are between the college and the university and around Boulevard Lake. Remember to use your bell or horn or your voice. Give them a nice friendly hello when you're coming up behind pedestrians or slower traffic. And it's safe for kids and of course people of all abilities. Super relaxing to use the multi-use trails. Next slide, please. the shared lanes in Thunder Bay, there's not enough space for a car and a bike side by side. So take the lane when necessary. And there you'll see special symbols like we see here. This is Donald Street. There's also trails or lanes like this along Oliver Road. And it shows cyclists where to ride safely. And it also advises the drivers that people may be biking nearby. Next slide, please. And then bike lanes, we're very familiar with these around town. This is Court Street. There's also lanes like this along Vickers. It's painted lines that separate the bikes from cars with special symbols again. And they're maybe next to parked cars, and there's no parking in the bike lanes, but the doors may come out and get you. So beware of the door zone. And drivers should know that people will be biking next or in those areas. Next slide, please. So our protected bike lanes are growing slowly. This is about physical distancing, keeping people safe even before COVID. That's what protected bike lanes do. Vehicles cannot drive or park in these spaces, and they physically can't get in there. So we use bollards and other obstacles to separate bikes from cars. Curbs and concrete are the best, and you'll see curbs along Court Street. So we've got Arundel, Court, and Wardrobe have the protected bike lanes. So watch for that, and there's more to come according to the Transportation Master Plan. Next slide, please. So to be a safe cyclist, there's a few tenets that we follow, and they are to see, and that's about shoulder checks, keeping your eyes moving. Be seen, you could consider high visibility clothing or just a flashy shirt like this with high contrast, reflectors, lights, staying 1 meter from the curb. So if you're out in traffic more, people will see you because the drivers will see you because you're in their line of sight. You're not off to the side. And being predictable is about straight line riding and signaling and following through with your intention. And next slide, please. So our fundamentals, so if you took any of our courses, we get into this and we spend a lot of time on these fundamentals. And the acronym we use is MVPC, and we like to remember it by most valuable people cycle. All issues can be solved by using these principles to make us safer. So the M for maneuverability, be a meter from the curb, allowing you to negotiate obstacles. V for visibility is to see and be seen again. P for straight line, destination positioning, and we'll see that further on in the next slides. C for signaling, communication, signaling and eye contact, so making sure that the drivers see you and vice versa. And the next slide, which brings us back to Janet.
Hi. Okay, so the next slide, we're talking about cyclist positions from the curb. When you're cycling, you should maintain at least 1 meter from the curb or parked cars. If you ride too close, you might have a tendency to clip your pedal on the curb and you could fall off. Riding a meter from the curb, you also avoid some of the road edge hazards such as sewer grates, as you see in this picture, debris, potholes, and you won't have to weave around them. What was I say? 1 meter gives you also enough room to maneuver if a car passes too close, so you've got like basically an escape route. Just remember, so in this picture, we're doing also the straight ride, shoulder check, and always look ahead. Next slide.
And
sorry.
Janet, sorry. The person's question about wrong way riding applies here. So in this situation, why aren't you riding in traffic or against traffic? And what should you do if someone else is?
Panic.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
If you're riding the wrong way, the cars aren't expecting you to be riding against them. You should always be riding with traffic. Also, if you're riding the wrong way, the like I say, the cars aren't expecting you, and it's dangerous to be riding the wrong way. You should be riding with traffic. There's also like the hazard. So if you have like parked cars on the side of the road, yeah, and the other thing too is also not also riding the wrong way, but also riding on the sidewalk as well. So anybody else want to pitch in here?
Sometimes what I do when I'm finding someone riding the wrong way, I look at them and I go, oh, friend, it's so much safer to ride on the other side of the road, just as I'm passing, because you don't have a lot of time. But I've tried that in the past. Usually I don't get yelled at, so that's my strategy.
Use your kind words.
Yes.
I had something come up recently where somebody was riding on the wrong side, and it was a narrow road. And so what they were doing was forcing me to pass on the right, and I just refused as a driver to pass a vehicle or to pass a bike on the right. So I just waited behind them, and then they like asked what I was waiting for, and I said, well, I can only pass you on the left and I don't have room to do that. And so we had a chat, and it was actually really good. That's the first time that's happened to me, but usually because they're so far apart on a wide road, there's not that opportunity. But yeah, okay, I'm gonna go ahead to the next slide. Maybe, if I can. There we go.
This is obstructed lanes. I can barely see it. Okay, so if the lane's obstructed and there's not enough room for a bike and a car to share the lane, you should probably take the whole lane to prevent the car from trying to pass in a narrow space. Again, your distance is 1 meter from the curb or the obstruction. Don't rely on the motorist's judgment. Use your own judgment. Also, when I'm cycling, I always have a tendency, I'm always looking ahead. I'm kind of planning where I want to position on the road. If you do have to, like in this section here, we've got I guess it's debris. I would do a shoulder check to make sure that the lane's clear, because you're going to pull out and go around the debris. Signal that to the motorist what you're going to do. Shoulder check again before you make the move. Position yourself into the left lane, go around the debris. I do another shoulder check and then come back into your meter from the curb as well. What was I going to say? Some of the obstacles that you could encounter could be parked cars, construction that you might have to go around. Buses are another obstacle. The debris, like we talked about, there's potholes, sewer grates, and some people ride in the winter, so another obstruction is snowbanks. So those are some of the things. But always, if you have to go around an obstruction, always make sure you do your shoulder check. Signal to the motorist what you plan on doing. Do another shoulder check to make sure it's safe to do so, to reposition yourself. And then also, I do another shoulder check and before I reposition myself back into the meter from the curb. Next. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about narrow lanes. So this is also, with the narrow lanes, it's also if you have an obstruction in the lane. So if there's a narrow lane, you want to take the whole lane. Taking the whole lane means you're positioning yourself to prevent vehicles from trying to pass you and possibly forcing you into the curb or off the road. If you're taking the lane right down the center or just left of the center in the cars, like the tire tracks, if motorists want to pass, they'll change lanes, or they'll wait behind you until it's safe or clear to pass you. Lanes can narrow for a number of reasons, parked cars or construction. Before making any changes in your lane position, make sure to shoulder check. Pick your spot in traffic, signal, and shoulder check before moving. And the other the picture is the extra wide lanes. Be careful as a motorist, because the motorists, a motorist might try and use the extra wide lanes as if there was 2 lanes. So ride out a little bit further than you normally would. A guideline is to ride a meter to the right of where the vehicles travel. You're still visible and you're still part of the traffic flow. You'll avoid conflict with much of the right turning traffic as well. Next slide. Yeah. Can't even see what, oh, the parked cars. Okay. So where to park, where to ride if there's a parked car. So in this scenario, so you want to ride a straight line. Again, you're a meter from the curb. You want to avoid car doors opening. You want to remain visible to the traffic. So by riding a meter out, you limit having to negotiate rejoining the flow of the traffic. If you pull into the curb, drivers can't see you behind the parked vehicles. Passing a parked car, always shoulder check, signal, and shoulder check again. When changing position on the road, first shoulder check to see if there is a space to move out. Signal to indicate your intent to move out. Shoulder check again to be sure that the following vehicle is aware of your intentions. Some of the hazards when you're passing parked cars is the doors opening, or sometimes there might be a pedestrian that's emerging between the parked cars. You don't want to hit them. Cars pulling in and out of the parking spaces. So usually if I'm passing parked cars, I usually like to be vigilant. Like I say, I'm always looking ahead, just in case somebody decides they are pulling out of their parking space. What else is there? Distance between rows of parked cars will vary. So judgment is based on how long a gap it is and how visible you are and how difficult it is to rejoin the flow of traffic. Can I get the next slide? Can't even see this slide.
Passing on the right.
Okay, passing on the right. Okay. Passing on the right, motor vehicles are allowed to pass on the right as long as it's safe to do so. It's kind of a gray area for us as cyclists. We should use extreme caution. Adjust your speed and scan appropriately when passing on the right if you have to. Usually if you're doing a wide lane, 1 meter from the curb, 1 meter from the car, narrow lane, shoulder check, signal, and shoulder check again to pass, because you're going to pull out and pass on the left. Reminder, traffic already in passing lane has the right of way, so watch when you're pulling out. So again, if you decide that you have to go, you're going to do shoulder check, signal your intention, do another shoulder check, and then position yourself to pass. I sometimes, instead of passing on the right, if the traffic is stopped, I will stop behind the car in front of me. You can also, if you're, you can also stop, dismount, and walk on the sidewalk around the vehicle, close to the vehicle that's close to the curbs. Again, some of the hazards of passing on the right are car doors, so you need to watch for people in cars, taxis getting out of the vehicle. If you do need to pass on the right, pass with caution and adjust your speed. If 1 meter from the curb, if you're also if you're do decide and you're passing on the left, always do your shoulder checks and your signals and shoulder checks again. never pass a right turning vehicle on the right. Wait behind or pass on the left. You don't want them turning into you.
And we've added some lovely notations to help suggest if you're going to the right, you're going to be walking, and if you're passing to the left, you're going to be riding. We'll move on to the next one. It freezes when I start annotating. It'll be, there we go. Haha.
Positions at intersections.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so intersections are where the most collisions occur because there's so much happening at the intersections. So in the F1, the car is turning right and the cyclist is right beside the car, which is kind of a no-no. The motorist might not see the cyclist. You should plan ahead, anticipate the probable movements of the vehicles, establish a good lane position early. Reminder in this, you want to be seen, you want to be predictable. So in this position, I would try and make eye contact with the vehicle just to let him know that I was there. Also, if we're stopping it here, do not put your foot on the curb when you've stopped at if this is a stop sign or stop light, because you're taking yourself out of the flow of traffic. It also makes you unpredictable as the motorist not sure what you're doing or where you're going. In this scenario, so positioning F2, this is what I would do. I would position myself either at the back, or I would position myself at the front of the vehicle. I wouldn't position myself beside a car that's turning right. Okay, next.
All right, and now we have Leanne.
So destination positioning is thinking about where you want to be at the beginning of the intersection to end up to where you're trying to go at the end of the intersection. If you're going to go straight, where do you need to be and why? So one of the places not to be would be to swerve in here and be right here to go straight through the intersection, because during the intersection you're going to have to change lanes to get out around this car. So at the beginning of the intersection, you're going to choose the rightmost position in the lane that will get you to where you need to be safely. As we can see that this cyclist has chosen to be a meter from the car here, to be in the middle of the lane and go straight through this intersection, so that they don't have to change lanes or change positions within the intersection, and they're going to be a meter away from the car on the opposite side of the intersection. Next slide, please. Here, we're going to talk about what to do with a right turn only lane. In this position, or in this slide, the cyclist isn't turning right. And so if you're not turning right, you don't go into the right turning lane. Just like a car wouldn't do this. A car would maintain their spot in the lane. So there's two options here for the cyclist. If it's a wider lane, they can go and stay to the right-hand side of the lane, lane where they're going to go straight through. So that would be the left-hand side of the lane here. If it's not a wider lane, the other thing they can do is position themselves right in the middle of the lane so that this car coming up behind them is not going to try and go right erroneously or cut them off anyway, so they can take the full lane. But again, the cyclist is looking where they need to be, and again, they're looking behind them to decide what position they're going to be here. But under no circumstances, if they're not turning right, are they going to go into the right turn lane. If they were, they could come, if they were turning right, they are going to position themselves right here behind the car and not sneak up beside it, because that is just a recipe for disaster. Next slide, please. All right, here we're doing a left turn from a residential street to a residential street. Some of my favorite riding is on residential streets. So the cyclist is first going to shoulder check, look behind them, stick out their arm, left hand signal, and then shoulder check before they move position. They are going to move to the left hand side of the lane or the center, near the center of the whole residential road. This is so that they are letting drivers know that they're going to make a move and they're taking their space, so hopefully no cars will overtake them on their left-hand side. Then they're going to signal again and then put their hands on the handlebars and move around. When they exit the middle of this lane, let's pretend that our little lines are here, so they're in the middle of the right-hand lane, they're actually going to move to the middle of that lane again, just like a car would do. This is predictable. This is being predictable. You're going to shoulder check here once you're here, looking for any cars turning right. You're going to signal that you're going to turn right, and you're going to shoulder check again, and then you're going to move into that lane. All right, and that's part of why we're being predictable and taking our space. Sorry, Caroline, next one. All right, this is a left turn again, but doing something a little bit more busy, an arterial. So an example would be doing this on Balmoral or Oliver, for instance, a feeder lane. So if we're doing it in slower traffic, where we have to where there's a whole bunch of cars here and we've got to maneuver, what we're going to do is we're going to need to get over to the left-hand lane. So we're going to shoulder check, signal, and this here is another shoulder check. They call it life-saving shoulder check. And it's life-saving because before you're moving in a lane filled with cars, you're going to look to make sure that nothing's coming up right behind you. All right, and then they're going to move to this edge of the lane. Again, they're going to do the whole thing again. Shoulder check, signal, or sorry, shoulder check, and move to the inside of the next lane. And then shoulder check, signal, shoulder check, and move to the middle of the lane. This is, again, if it's slower traffic. If it's faster traffic with bigger spaces, you can look behind you and look at all of the traffic on both lanes, and you can do the maneuver if you look and shoulder check all at once to get to where you need to go, which would be in the middle of this lane. Yeah, move like a boss, as I call it. All right, when you make the turn, when the lights say that you can do so, and the lights would be just like you're a car, either you have an advance left or a green light and there's no cars coming this way, then what you're going to do is you're going to make the turn from the middle of this lane over to the middle of this lane. We're not going to do a Thunder Bay turn. We're going to do it just like a vehicle should. At that point, you're going to shoulder check, signal shoulder check. You want to make sure there's no cars turning right, and you're going to move again right here to this position. If you have slower moving traffic, if you do not have slower moving traffic, you can check to make sure that this lane is clear, there's no cars coming this way, there's nothing turning right, and you can make sure that everything is clear, shoulder check, signal shoulder check, and then move like a boss right to the 1 meter from the curve spot. All right, next slide, please. All right, and this is essentially the exact same adventure, except we're doing it from a left turning only lane. So again, fast moving traffic, bigger spaces. You can do a look at both of the lanes. Is there any traffic coming this way? You will shoulder check, signal, shoulder check. If there's a big space and not a lot of traffic, you could move like a boss all in one go. If your traffic is going slower and there's lots of cars, then you will do our shoulder check, signal, shoulder check, and move from each side of the lane all the way over to the left-hand lane. Once you're in the left-hand only turning lane, you want to take the middle of that. You don't want anybody sneaking up across beside you. You want to be here, take the whole lane. It's a narrow lane. And again, when you do the turn, when the lights say that you can do so, or there's when you can do so, you go again to the middle of that leftmost lane, and then you again shoulder check, signal, shoulder check, and move either in two positions, or if you check to make sure that there's nothing coming here or through the lights like this, then you can do it all in one move and move like a boss to get back over here.
And Leanne, because I know a lot of people are intimidated by intersections that look like this, can you cover how the pedestrian crossing option?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. So just when I first started riding a bike, I would never do this on Balmoral, and I actually like to practice it. So if this doesn't float your boat, and that's totally okay, you can right here, get off, get on the sidewalk, have a nice little jaunt, and do a pedestrian crossing, right? You get over here, and then when it's safe to do so, once you've crossed with the lights, it's safe to do so, you can get back on and join the flow of traffic. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Next slide, please, Caroline. Oh yeah, and please, for the love of all things good, don't ride on the sidewalk. That is not going to help us, and it actually makes you more of a target because vehicles are not expecting fast-moving things in intersections of coming out of driveways that would be in between sidewalks. All right, Ken, it's over to you. Oh, Janet.
I have railroad tracks.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not prepared, but I will wing railroad tracks.
Would you like
railroad tracks.
Would you like me to do them?
It's okay.
Okay, you
so
rock
the
it.
trick with railroad tracks is to go across them perpendicular. If you cross the railroad tracks and get your front wheel tangled up in a railroad track, there will be sad stories that you will tell for a lifetime. So the idea is to move out into traffic if necessary. You're going to do your shoulder check, your signal, and your life saver shoulder check, and come out into the lane, and then go across perpendicular on the so whichever way it is. If you're going to turn, if you need to, you're just going to signal in and go perpendicular. So really one of the few places that we have these is Memorial Avenue and Fort William Road, and it's best to take a look at them before you go ahead and do this. Even get off, we train by getting off and going onto the sidewalk and talking through it. So again, it's just to stay perpendicular, to signal and let people behind you know that you are crossing those railroad tracks. So next slide, please. So the four-way intersection, this is actually in the Highway Traffic Act. So the idea is here that when both vehicles arrive at the exact same time, you are going to give the right of way to the vehicle on the right. So in this scenario, I have to get my drawing going here. The vehicle A would go first because they are on the right side of those two vehicles. So if you find yourself there as a car, driving your car, or on the pedals of your bicycle, you would have the right of way. Eye contact is a very important piece of this, to make sure that you're watching each other and watching for those wheels to turn and advance into the intersection. And the idea behind this is because car A in this scenario will cross across that intersection much faster than car B. Car B has a lot further to go than car A to get through this point where they would bump fenders. Okay, next slide, please. So this is turning lanes. So I cannot think of a place in Thunder Bay with this scenario. This is a one-way street on this side and joining onto a two-way street on the top and a two-way street on the bottom, and then a one-way street exit. So this is almost like maybe in Duluth or something, where you'd be going out onto an expressway, which you wouldn't want to do with a bicycle. So if you needed to get over here, for example, you would start your turn from over here. So the same scenarios that Leanne talked about how to get over would apply, how to do your shoulder checks and whatnot. And over here where Leanne might be drawing is perhaps your pandemic pizza. And that's where you would want to be. So if you wanted to come into this space, you would start your ride from here. So you would be in the center lane and take that lane to go over, to make it over on the right-hand side of this lane. And the easiest, of course, is always going to be your right-hand turn, and you would end up over here. So it's a bit tricky, but you would use the exact same principles as you would on Memorial or Balmoral Street to get yourself into these spots wherever you need to be. Okay, so next slide, please. And this is merges and merges and diverges. So Edward and Redwood would be an example of where you might find yourself riding. So the idea here again is destination positioning. If you are just flowing through this intersection, you would just stay in this lane here. If you are going to be exiting, you would find yourself making a right-hand turn, and you're going to watch behind you to see who might be entering the space behind you, and you would end up into this space here and exit. Um, and that's about that. It's if you're entering, of course, into the intersection, you would find yourself um, looking over your left shoulder and doing your safety check and your signaling, and then advance into the lane. So next slide, please. And there's no pizza on this slide, please. And so for trucks are quite a hazard in amongst themselves. You'll see on the slide, there's a number of nicely illustrated places that you don't want to find yourself. You are going, or any of these little circles. So the idea behind that is because those are your no-go zones. Truck drivers have restricted lines of sight. If you can't see the mirrors of the truck, the driver cannot see you. So you would wait where the cyclist is and give them plenty of space and let them do their thing. And then when it's your time, you do your thing. The alternative, of course, is to exit the roadway and do a pedestrian crossing if you want to get around. If this truck's stuck or something, you might want to get around it and do a pedestrian crossing and carry on that way. And next slide, please. And it also involves a truck. So this is where the truck is turning. So again, we have our no-go zones. You would get pinched in these spots along the curb. You don't want to be in there. So again, wait for that truck to do its maneuver, and then it's your turn. So that's that. Many sad stories about trucks. We don't want to get tangled up with those. So one of my favorite things to do is to help figure out how to get people across town. And so when in doubt, do use Google Maps to let you plan a cycling route. So if you go onto Google Maps, you can switch from a car route, pedestrian route, or a cycling route. And it will find routes that include trails and bike lanes and to your comfort level. And don't worry if you find yourself in a spot where you have multi-lanes of traffic and you're not comfortable, do that pedestrian crossing as we discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So group riding, and Leanne's front and center on this slide, very nice. So I like to have a group meeting beforehand and talk about who are the strong riders in the group, and to have them at the lead and the tail so that they can assist others and watch out for each other. We want to communicate hazards and intentions. So if there's some bad um, road up ahead and we want to pass that along down the group, you could point to it, or you can communicate that there's a skunk on the road or some horrible thing. Make your own decisions. Make sure that you don't just be a salmon and just keep going across the stream when it's not safe. You're going to look both ways. You're going to signal your intentions as you would as if you were riding by yourself. Follow the rules of the road, just as if you were on your own. So next slide, please. And this is my turn to be front and center here. And the rural riding is all about relaxed, quiet roads, but there are some hazards to watch out for, as written up here: the gravel and unpaved shoulders. Faster vehicles, so there's higher speeds. So rather than 50, 60K like we have around the city, you're looking at 90K, 80K. So that's something to keep an eye on. The vehicles are going faster. Watch for vehicles also that may be passing another vehicle. So that means that they are coming in the same lane as you, and the closing speed will be quite quite scary. So you need to watch for vehicles that are pulling out to pass and maybe pull over a bit to give them the room. So watch out, you may be facing an oncoming vehicle. So next slide, please. So at Eco Superior and Safe Cycling, we have other adult courses. We have discovery rides, which can include community rides in various neighborhoods with town councilors sometimes, historical tours of different neighborhoods where we'd have a historian that would lead the tour, coffee tours where we have a beverage or so. Little free library tours were in the past too. So we're looking for ideas for different themes for our tours. There's instructor training. So if this has got you very, very interested and you're hungry for more, there's lots of ways that you can get more involved. So next slide, please. And we thank you very much for attending this webinar. In these pandemic times, this is the way that we can get the information out. And to learn more, you can connect with us online as below. So Caroline now will come back. I hope she's still there. And we'll take the Q&A and wrap up. And thank you very much for visiting with us.
All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you to all of the instructors and, of course, to everybody who's here today. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. We've had a couple of things that have come up that we have been kind of answering as they come in, but happy to take more questions now. And while questions are coming in, I'll just go ahead and review some of the conversations that were going on in the chat. So Svenna pointed out that when you're in a left turn lane, often you don't trigger that advanced signal. And that's true at most intersections in Thunder Bay, whether you're in the left turn lane or in any lane at the intersection. If it is an intersection that isn't automatically timed, if it's triggered, I think typically by either the weight or the metal of the vehicle, bicycles can't trigger that in Thunder Bay, with the exception of, I think, a couple of intersections on Vickers. So we talked about some options being either walking the intersection, dismounting and walking the intersection, or one thing that I choose to do is I wave the car behind me to get really close, and usually it's some very nice person who's like, no, I'm giving you all of this space. And I'm like, I've been waiting here 5 minutes. So sometimes there's a good laugh over like when they realize I can't trigger the signal. So that was one thing that we talked about in the chat. Also in the chat, if there are any specific intersections that you have questions about, you want to know how to navigate them better, feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to speak to those specific locations. So I'm just going to give a couple more minutes for questions to come in as well.
Also, Caroline, I wanted to say that we were talking about all the tours that we do during non-COVID times. A lot of those tours are actually listed on the Safe Cycling website. So if you wanted to do a self-directed tour, you can take a look at that under Family Virtual Tours. Of course, you can do them by yourself or with your family or with friends. And you can take a look at those tours, and they're mapped out for you to enjoy when you're social distancing.
I have a question for Caroline. Are there more of these lovely webinars? What's the next topic?
Why, yes, the next topic is cleaning your bike, but following that, we have mapping. So if folks are really interested in mapping their routes, we're going to have some great resources available. And that webinar will be half urban focused and half rural focused. And it's going to be focused on kind of creative routes with your family or on your own, combining different types of infrastructure. And then, of course, the mapping skills.
Awesome.
I
Thank
haven't
you.
seen any questions come in yet, but we'll give folks another minute or two. And then one thing that's really exciting is that we are doing a touring webinar as well. That will be the last one in our series. And I feel like I'm forgetting one. What is between mapping and touring? Any of you guys remember? I think there's one more. Thank you, Bruce. Refine your ride. So it's primarily focused on effective gearing, stopping, and hill riding. Ooh, question. Can we use the Trans-Canada Highway? Who wants to answer that one?
Depends where you are, right, Janet?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't use the expressway in Thunder Bay because there's alternate routes. But if there are no alternate routes, then yes, we are forced to use the Trans-Canada Highway.
Yeah, and it usually depends on the municipal bylaw. So in Thunder Bay and in Shunya, you can't use the Trans-Canada Highway. So for instance, there's no legal way for a cyclist to arrive by bike to the Terry Fox Lookout, which is a shame.
Oh, yeah.
But some municipalities do allow it. Ooh, here is a question. The multi-use trails sometimes have those yellow metal barriers at the end. In one location, they're extra close together on the north side of the street at Chapel's entrance. My mid-fat bike has wide handlebars. It's sketchy. Can they adjust those yellow things? Not my handlebars.
I agree with Cass. That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Who can we talk to about that, Caroline?
I'm typing an email address in the comments.
Ooh, excellent.
So you can contact Derek Smith. He's the new mobility coordinator about that. And depending on where it is, it might be Derek's responsibility or it might be Werner Schwartz's responsibility at Parks, depending on the location. But Derek could certainly point you in the right direction, and you can go from there and see if there's anything that can be done.
Maybe they can adjust the opening a little wider.
There one, I can't remember if it's on golf links that it says you need to get off your bike to walk through them.
Yeah, there should be one on golf links. So golf links in particular is so there are some different kinds of infrastructure. So there's a multi-use trail versus a separated bike lane. Mm-hmm. And one of the differences is that separated bike lanes have something called cross rides, whereas multi-use trails do not have cross rides. And part of it has to do with the time that they were installed. So we talked about how cyclists on the sidewalk are out of the line of sight of the driver, and so it becomes a dangerous place to ride. And if you think about the position of the multi-use trail, it's in a very similar situation as the sidewalk. And so on golf links, it's a multi-use trail, so you're actually not allowed to cycle through the intersection. So that might be why some of those yellow barriers are closer on golf links versus if you're in a cycle ride or a cross ride. And Arundel is an example of a cross ride, and so is Wardrobe, where it's a separated bike lane and not a multi-use trail. Then you're allowed to ride through the intersections. And I don't know the details about what different safety, what the different installation safety requirements are, but that's when you are and aren't allowed to ride through the intersection. Yeah, and it does. Yeah, it's right. Cass is pointing out that it is. Yeah, there is a lot of dismounting involved. Yeah, and that's too bad.
Or you could, Cass, you could ride on the road. That's the other thing. That's a wide lane golf links road, right? So it depends. If you have your kids with you, maybe not so much, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and your speed too might be something you want to consider. I'm just thinking of like Boulevard, where you have the option of riding on the road or the multi-use trail, and the multi-use trail has lots of pedestrians, and the road doesn't have a lot of cars. So depending on your speed, that might dictate which location you choose to ride in. Some experienced riders have shared that safety is statistically increased by not wearing a helmet. Can you speak to that? I think this is a Ken question.
Well, there were some studies some time ago, and I think it even might have come from Down Under or something that tracked helmet use, and how closely vehicles pass you when you have a helmet on versus when you're not wearing a helmet. And they measured how far away the vehicles were and found that the vehicles passing a person with a helmet would actually come closer. I don't know if that study has ever been replicated, or like double blind taste tested sort of thing, but it's definitely a big debate. Many people believe that the streets should be better serving us, such that we don't need to wear a helmet. It is a personal choice. We do recommend it with safe cycling. The helmet is your last line of defense should something untoward happen and something unpredicted happen. So it's something we insist on for our rides as well. So that's our take on helmets here. And Cass has spoken up on it. Brain injured here, wear a helmet until better infrastructure in town. Exactly. Paramedic brother agrees. He doesn't like scraping your brain off the sidewalk with a spatula. Very nice.
Yeah, and definitely, like there are definitely statistics showing that helmets save lives and prevent brain injuries. The interesting thing is that there are other activities where brain injury is a risk and helmets aren't worn. Driving is an example. So there's no study about the impacts on helmets in brain injuries in driving, and so there's been some studies that show that as a result of that, cycling is perceived as more dangerous than driving. But we don't have any statistics about how many lives wearing a helmet has saved for drivers. Has TBA considered lowering speed limits on certain north-south roadways, example Memorial and Balmoral? The one that I think is coming is in front of St. Joe's, and I know Ken wants to speak more.
Well, I've actually brought this up a number of times with various counselors, and it's difficult to get traction on this. Despite that, it's in their transportation master plan to reduce speeds. It's a Vision Zero principle to reduce speeds. There's lots of documented studies that the lower the speed, the less injury, the more chance of survivability should a pedestrian or a cyclist be hit by a speeding vehicle. So it's something that has been talked about. When it comes, I don't know, but it's every chance I get, I bring it up with counselors and I invite people to do the same.
Cool. I'm going to give about 1 more minute for folks in the chat to post any questions that you have.
Awesome
Benna
questions.
has posted out with that there are also those are also routes with lots of shops. So the north-south roadways, and that's definitely true.
Everybody benefits from lower speeds. If two vehicles are meeting each other, like motor vehicles, at 70K, which is the norm on Memorial Avenue, carnage ensues. Anybody hear the train whistle here?
Yep. Perpendicular
Well,
over those tracks.
well, I think that
Guys, I'm gonna have to move my car, okay?
Great. Well, I'll send a follow-up email with those resources that we shared in the chat. And then I will also send a link to the webinar virtually once it's available, because we are recording today. Oh gosh, did you see Cass's comment? Yeah, so I'll send out the link to the recorded webinar once it's available. Usually I'm about 2 days in doing that, and hopefully I'll be able to do it in the next 2 days, but after that I go on holidays. So if it's next week, I apologize, but I'll send the links that we shared at the same time that I send the webinar, and as I said, aiming to send that out Thursday. Is best intentions. We'll see how it goes. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the webinar today. I hope that you consider joining us in the future. And if any further questions come up, feel free to respond to my email and I'll either answer or pass it along to Leanne, Janet, or Ken. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh boy. So we'll have to, the four of us want to debrief, we'll have to leave and come back.
Okay.